Hello, I'm here to present Store2Dispatch, a simulation-based energy planning product for increased renewable penetration. Store2Dispatch has proudly been developed at the University of California, Berkeley. Large-scale grid energy storage has become an increasingly important topic in the energy area. There are traditional ways of storing energy like pumped hydro and compressed air, which basically create a potential energy reservoir that can be tapped into at times where we have an increased demand of energy and are unable to meet the supply necessary to balance the load. However, lately there's been new technologies that are competing in this area, like redox batteries, several types of sodium or nickel cadmium batteries, hydrogen combustion turbines, and fuel cells. Some of the larger players in this area are Enervolt, which is a redox flow battery system that was spun off Berkeley in 2008. There's also Beacon Power, which is a leader in flywheel technology, and the highly politicized A123, which was a lithium nanoscale battery technology developed at MIT in 2001. And the company has been highly politicized, just like Solyndra, because it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on October 16th of this year. It actually filed for bankruptcy after receiving $250 million of government grants. And the question people ask themselves is, why? Why is storage receiving so much attention nowadays? To understand storage, we first need to understand the nature of renewable power supply. Clean energy sources, like wind and solar, are intermittent and are non-dispatchable. What that means is that the power that we can get from these sources varies throughout the day, and we are unable to dispatch or turn on and off that energy supply whenever we want. We need to wait until the environment actually has the conditions that either give us enough sunlight or wind to produce the power we need. On the other hand, power demand also varies. So during the night when people are sleeping, the amount of power necessary is low, and when people wake up, they go to work, commercial power demand increases, and when they come back, turn on their TV, turn on all their lights, residential power demand also increases, and there's a natural, almost sinusoidal path that this demand takes every day. Storage technology is basically necessary to collect any energy surplus generated when renewable energy is higher than the required demand, and then rapidly dispatch it when there's an energy deficit and the demand is higher than the supply. This relates to the concept of load management. Power supply and demand must be kept in balance at all times. Voltage regulation is the ability of a system to provide near constant voltage over a wide range of load conditions. Power misbalance can be modeled as a queue of electrons needing to be served by the system. Let me elaborate. You have electrons going on the supply and the demand side. If you actually have more supply and demand, you really only have, at least in this model, two options. The first is you waste that energy because it cannot be stored anywhere, and the second is you actually store it. And you're able to charge a battery of some sort, whether it's a redox flow battery or pumped hydro or a flywheel or hydrogen, and you later keep that reservoir to dispatch it when conditions change and demand exceeds supply. So when demand exceeds supply, if you have a large enough capacity to meet the demand with your battery technology, just discharging the energy that was loaded onto it, then you're fine. If not, if the conditions actually, the gap between demand and supply is large enough, sometimes you also have to do what's called peaking power plants. In most cases, these are gas plants that basically are able to rapidly ramp up their power supply in order to meet the demand. So to summarize again, you have two scenarios: supply exceeds demand or demand exceeds supply. In each of these scenarios, you have two options. You either charge the battery or discharge the battery, and when supply is greater than demand, and your battery is completely full, that energy goes to waste. If demand is higher than supply and you're not able to meet your current demand needs with only your storage capacity, then you need to turn on some peaking power plants. So let's take a look at the interface for our simulation product. First, we put the base load, which is basically the power supply doesn't change throughout the day. Your storage capacity, which is all the charge you can accumulate throughout the month. This simulation runs for 1 month. Then your peak trigger for gas power. What this means basically is that whenever your storage capacity and your batteries aren't able to meet the demand necessary, you turn on the gas peaking power plants, and then you start looking at the actual ebb and flow of your renewable energy power. So you put the peak power, the minimum power, and what time of day you get the most amount of sunlight or wind or whatever. And now we look at the peak power demand, which follows a different cycle, and it also has a peak demand and has a minimum demand. And the peak demand actually happens at a different time as the renewable energy peak. And then you look at your charge. So how quickly are you able to store up your storage capacity and build that up, and how quickly you're able to discharge it. At the same time, when you use gas peaking power plants, how much power are you able to supply in an hour in order to meet demand? And now we talk about the intermittency of renewable energy. Is it very variable and intermittent, or is it not? In this case, 10 is the most variable and 0 is the least variable. We choose a moderate 2. Then we start looking at emissions. Each base load has a kilogram per megawatt hour emission, and the CO2 peaking power also has another base load. Finally, you have the misbalance for blackout. So what's the difference in power that would basically be higher than what you're able to do from a voltage regulation standpoint? Now we submit, and our simulation runs. So this is a very powerful simulation software called Sigma that's able to use event graphs to describe the model that we have just described. And we use some Boolean logic to understand which of those conditions is most appropriate, whether to store or discharge, whether the Q is negative or positive, and make sure that the Q always goes back to 0 so that we can have no blackouts and that load management is done appropriately. So let's see some simulation scenarios. So the first scenario we're looking at is basically a moderate base load and a fairly low renewable peak, a renewable power range from the peak to the trough, or the minimum. And then the storage capacity is actually quite low at 500 megawatts. The intermittency is also fairly low, so it's quite stable. And we have a fairly moderate blackout misbalance threshold, which means how much difference of power is the system able to handle from a voltage regulation standpoint before you have a blackout because the frequency of your power supply starts changing too much. We see that under these conditions, we do not have a blackout, so that's to say that we can run the simulation for 720 hours, that is 30 days or 1 month, and we see the cumulative amount of emissions we have. So in this case, it's 4 to the 9th kilograms of CO2, and we see the cumulative peaking gas energy, and the cumulative wasted renewable energy from a megawatt hour standpoint. As you can see, we're actually requiring as much peak gas energy to meet our demand as we're wasting energy because we're not able to store it. So obviously these conditions are not correct. So let's tweak it. If we change the baseload supply to be lower and we increase the renewable power range so it can go from 250 megawatts to 50 megawatts, and we actually double the storage capacity and we make it a little bit more variable and intermittent, we keep the threshold the same, we see that we're able to drastically reduce emissions, we're able to drastically reduce the peak gas energy. However, we're actually still wasting a lot of renewable energy. The twofold increase in storage isn't able to really account for the increase in renewable power range that we did from the 150 to 25 megawatts to this new 250 megawatt to 50 megawatt range. So let's increase the storage capacity. So from 1,000 megawatts, let's increase it to 10,000 megawatts. And because we have more of a renewable power supply, we expect that increased volume to actually come with some increased variability and intermittency. In this case, we see that there also is no blackout. We see that the emissions are still significantly reduced. The peak gas energy stays relatively low because the gas energy is basically just used at the beginning when your battery isn't charged at all. At the beginning of the simulation, you start with an empty battery and you need to charge it before you can use it in subsequent conditions. And your cumulative wasted renewable energy actually decreases substantially. So this is starting to resemble a more optimum scenario, but as you can see, you're still wasting a lot of energy. You're still, not able to harness that untapped potential of the wind and the sun. and you still basically have 17,000 megawatt hours that you aren't using. Another interesting thing to look at, as I said before, is the voltage regulation side of this. So we had actually set a 20 megawatt power misbalance as something that the energy system could account for and regulate. If we change that to, let's say, 15 megawatts, it actually is low enough that certain conditions occur where within 1 hour cycle, the supply adjustments to meet the demand or vice versa aren't able to quickly accommodate for that gap quickly enough for the voltage regulations conditions, in this case 15 megawatts, to still hold. And after 179 hours into the simulation, or 7.5 days into the simulation, we have a blackout. So the conclusions for this product is that, as illustrated by these scenarios, large-scale grid energy storage, robust and reactive voltage regulation, and effective load management is required for increased penetration of intermittent renewable power generation like wind and solar. Store2Dispatch is a simple way to promote awareness about the need for large-scale grid energy storage, a simulation that can be used for energy planning to predict the emissions and the wasted renewable energy of an energy system, and a tool that can help simulate time to failure of the grid when load misbalancing causes a blackout by the system's inability to implement effective voltage regulation. If you're interested in our product, stay tuned for enhancements on it. We plan to launch a website soon where you could do some of your own scenarios and understand the impact of renewable energy and large-scale storage. Thank you and have a great day.